The threat of a bank run looms large as we sit and wonder whether or not Silicon Valley Bank is going to allow its customers to be made whole with or without help from the federal government, if somebody is going to buy them, and what this means for the future in our economy. So we'll be talking just a bit about that, what that means, and where we go from there. In other news, two more banks suffer in the collapse, including one who denied Donald Trump's business after his presidency. So we'll go over some of that, what that means, and where we go. If, and this is a big if right now, if we have time, a mass of border jumpers rushed the border in El Paso with frustration over a rumor that they heard. So we'll be talking just a bit about that and what's happening there and what we do with this going forward. And a urology clinic suggests vas madness, promoting vasectomies during the annual men's college football game, or basketball game rather. It is going to be all this and more. I was the one flying the balloons. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. The threat of a bank run looms. So apparently there's some noise in the microphone, and wow, that is penned out. Holy crap. We actually might have to fix something here while we're on air because, I'm looking at this and it's just pinning right up straight to the top. So let me double check some connections here. Okay, there's that, but that is like dead out to the top. Let me look at my filters here. Why is my gain so high? 1 2 1 2. All right, let's see if that's any better. That's still pegging pretty high, but we're at least at a point where the gain is not it's not everything. You're gonna hear my voice here for just a bit, talking over myself. Gain is not it's not everything. You're gonna hear my voice here for just a bit, talking over myself. Okay, that sounds way better than what it did before. Yeah, I looked over and I can see again where there's some where it is pinning out and pegging out to the top, but Well, we've got some sound issues because this is totally a professional setup here, but we've got a lot to go over here today. So it does sound again like I listen to myself and it sounds good. So we're gonna fly with it right now, and I'll do some testing off screen here to see what happens with this and where we go. But before we get into our main news of the day, which is pretty much going to be an extended finance segment, I'm not gonna lie, we're mostly going to go over SVB. There's a lot of SVB information. And then we've also got, what was the other one? There were a couple other ones that went on with this. Let's see. First Republic Bank, which actually has not failed, but it does look like it's teetering right now because all the stock has dropped off, and then Signature Bank as well. So we'll go over some of that over here on Contemporary. Before we get started, make sure you guys go check out great programming such as The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys. Go check out Tweets by Brit, Mr. Behavior, The No Gimmicks Podcast, and more as we aim to bring you a better news experience. From the common man for the common man. That is right, for too long, too many of us have got our news from people who wear suits that cost more than our houses. It is no more for that. You can get your news, your culture, your music, your religion, and a host of other things with the hosts over at TurnSomePagesProductions.com. So go check out all that great programming as we aim to bring you a better news and culture experience. And we're going to abbreviate at this point, and we're going to get right into it because we've got so much to go over. And we are going to start, as we always do, with the Dow. Get over to that. Let's get the news scene up and let's start. And a reminder, by the way, that I've got the wrong window open. Let's get that turned on. Let's get that one turned off, because I guess I do use the same new scene for Legend of Zelda as I do for everything else. All right, we're gonna start here with the Dow today. Let's get the live chat up so I can see what you guys got going on. And if the audio is okay, and as I see if there are more people that gather in here today, as I see more people gather in, I will be checking and asking just to see how the volume is doing, because yeah, I mean, just looking at the pegs at the beginning, like, wow, that's a lot of volume coming off of there when it goes straight to the top. All right, looking at the Dow, which was an interesting day today because it looked, and the futures were looking like everything was going to dump straight out. But it didn't. It did dump out at the very beginning, but it clawed its way back before dropping. Like, every gain that was made today just got erased almost instantly, with two larger gains that held but still erased. The Dow winding up to be 90.5 points down, or to 31,819.14, or a 0.25% loss. But I mean, it went down from much more loss than that, all the way back up to 100-point gain at one point here. So I don't know where this is going to go. Part of the problem with this is, as we inflate our way into this, remember what we see when we look at the Dow chart is that is represented by dollars. Not particularly one-to-one, but this is represented by dollars. So as the volume of the Dow grows, because the value of the dollar becomes less, getting down to that 17,000 mark that we saw all the way back in 2020 at the very beginning of the pandemic is going to be harder and harder. And if you do see that 17,000 mark again, it's going to be what we would have seen as a 10,000 or a sub 10,000 Dow at that same time period if it were to get down to that point today. So we'll continue to watch this and see where this goes to see what happens on the news. Looking at the Bitcoin, which, by the way, if you have Bitcoin, you won today. The Bitcoin, I believe, was a little bit, it took one big jump over the weekend, bringing itself back up to 23,000 levels from a little bit of on sale almost before, when we last looked at it on Friday, jumping up over the weekend into the 23,000 range before taking a major spike, almost getting to 25,000 today on its major spike, bringing us back out to the one day we see where the spike occurred. And well, it's still on sale from where it was when we saw 67,000 per Bitcoin, but it's starting to gain, it's starting to bring itself back in, because I think a lot of people are wondering whether or not they want to keep their money in volatile banks. So we'll be seeing what's happening with that and where that goes. Looking in at your gas prices around the Madison area, it looks like some reprieve may be on the way for you guys here after a brief spike to 340 at the Quick Trip Speedways and the BP going into the Isthmus. It looks like some of the stations are starting to ease back off again. The Quick Trip on the west side down to 330. The Quick Trip going into the Isthmus still at 340, but the BP around it is also down to 330, 318. on the north side of the lake, which is phenomenal considering that one was one of the first ones to hit 340. So watch your prices. I mean, now is not going to be the time to go fill up because it looks like it's on a downward spiral, unless, of course, your stations have already hit the downward spiral, in which case go to town as much as you can in $3 per gallon gas, but go to town, go check it out. But that's what we see coming off of that. Let's grab one from IBD, and we have one article on the layoffs, and then we will get into the main news of the day. From Investors Business Daily, Dow Futures, banking crisis escalates ahead of CPI inflation report. GitLab, Tesla, Schwab in focus. From Scott Latonin, Dow Futures were higher ahead of Tuesday's open as the banking crisis continues to escalate. With the two large bank failures in recent days, SVB Financial and Signature Bank. Meanwhile, Schwab stock plunged 11% on Monday on growing liquidity fears, while Tesla shares climbed after the company ramped up hiring at its Gigafactory in Texas, and GitLab crumbled 36% late on earnings. The SPDR S&P Regional Banking ETF dived more than 12% on Monday, even after cutting some losses. That's on top of the 16% loss it had last week. Regional Bank First Republic crashed nearly 62%, Key Corp dove 27.3%, and Western Alliance crumbled 47%. Charles Schwab plunged on fears that the largest U.S. brokerage will need to sell some of its bank holdings to cover deposits. Withdrawals, Schwab stock dropped to its worst point on the day, would be the largest percentage decrease on record, based on data that goes back to September 23rd, 1987, according to the Dow. Major U.S. banks weren't spared from selling either. Bank of America, JP Morgan, and Wells Fargo, falling 5.8%, 1.8%, and 7.1% respectively, while Wells Fargo was having other problems. Remember, we talked about that on Friday. On the CPI report, on the economic front, eyes will be on the Consumer Price Index on Tuesday. The CPI is expected to rise 0.4%, both overall and excluding food and energy. That would bring the headline CPI inflation rate down to 6% from 6.1% in January, with the core inflation rate easing to 5.5% from 5.6%. Wall Street suddenly sees a solid chance that the Federal Reserve will pause its rate hiking campaign at next week's meeting, as the failure of three banks stokes concerns about the broader financial sector stress. Dude, I want the rate hikes to pause, but I'm going to tell you right now, given the fact that we are about to go dump billions of dollars of funny money into at least one bank, but it looks like two now. If you stop those rate hikes right now, you are out of your mind. If you think this is a good idea right now, in spite of the fact that you have banks failing, the fact that they just decided to go money printer, go burr, and go in and make sure that everybody's going to be whole again, so says the Treasury Department, that money is coming straight from the printer. Pausing the rate hikes now it's going to be a disaster for you. As much as I want to see them stop so I can go buy a house. Half-point moves are now off the table just a week after Fed Chair Jerome Powell signaled that policymakers are ready to re-accelerate rate hikes at next week's meeting from February's quarter-point pace. Are you ready to see 9 again? Because that's how you see 9 again. Now a sharp dive in Treasury yields is signaling sudden doubts about the strength of the economy. Even if the Fed doesn't pause next week, markets are betting the rate cuts are around the corner. On the earnings front, GitLab toppled 36% in extended trade after the company's weaker-than-expected revenue guidance. Earnings continue trickling out of the tail end of the season this week. Among them are Academy Sports and Outdoors, Adobe, Dollar General, FedEx, Five Below, and Lennar. On the market today, on Monday, the Dow fell 0.3, and the S&P lost 0.15. The tech-heavy Nasdaq climbed 0.45 in a day of volatile trading. EV giant Tesla traded up 0.6 on Monday. Among Dow Jones stocks, Apple rose 1.3%, and Microsoft climbed 2.1% in today's stock market action. Social media giant Meta, IBD leaderboard watchlist Palo Alto, and New Relic, as well as Dow Jones stocks, Nike, and Salesforce are among the top stocks to watch in the new stock market correction. Palo Alto is an IBD leaderboard watchlist stock. New Relic was recently an IBD stock of the day, and Nike was featured in this week's Stocks Nearby Zone column. So that's what we have for that on the futures ahead of Tuesday's opening bell. The Dow rose 0.3 and the S&P moved up 0.2. The Nasdaq was also up 0.2. Remember, overnight action in Dow futures and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate into actual trading in the next regular stock market session. The 10-year yield dove to 3.5 on Monday as safe haven trade drove bonds sharply higher following the SVB collapse. Yeah, safe haven. Go put your money in the government. Safe haven. Oil prices sold off on Monday after Friday's brief bounce. West Texas Intermediate slid nearly 3%, trading below $75 a barrel. So that's what we see coming for that. On the layoffs report, before we get into the main news of the day, the SVB news from Fox Business. This one comes from our buddy Andrew Yang. Sarah Rumpf reporting, Andrew Yang warns of mass layoffs, calls for government intervention after Silicon Valley Bank collapse. Andrew Yang, the entrepreneur who grabbed national attention during his 2020 White House run and his 2021 New York City mayoral run, urged government intervention following the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, warning of potential mass layoffs in the near future and a financial contagion. In the absence of some kind of action, you'll see thousands of mass layoffs in defunct companies, a wiped-out generation of startups, Yang warned. And that's why you need to have universal income from the government. In a series of Twitter posts, the businessman urged the California government or the U.S. Treasury Department to intervene to prevent a series of calamities that would likely affect thousands of companies and individuals through no fault of their own. I think either California or the Treasury Department should backstop Silicon Valley. Thousands of companies will fold or lay people off the next week because of lack of access to accounts through no fault of their own. Yang argued that the collapse was not SVB's client's fault, but the managers of the previous esteemed bank. Take the equity and fire the managers. There's a big difference between irresponsible bank managers and the thousands of customers and entrepreneurs and employees who choose to use the bank that was one of the biggest banks in the country. Punish one, but the others blameless, except they didn't choose the right bank. Oh, Yang said. Yang prophesied that layoffs would start, especially spread a financial contagion in California, where many tech startups are located and used SVB. A huge problem in California, in particular, is spreading financial contagion that will infect a host of regional banks at a minimum, Yang shared. Yang argued the federal officials will need to be the SVB's white knight to save the bank, since the massive bank has a limited number of potential saviors. The natural white knights who could save SVB are unlikely to do so because unless they get induced or a great deal. It's a big bank with a limited number of potential saviors. Again, why you probably need active leadership from officials to backstop, Yang added. So, and I mean, this leads almost perfectly into where we're going to start from the beginning here. Talking about what actually happened with SVB and also First Republic and... why do I keep forgetting the other one? Signature Bank. I keep wanting to say Savings Bank, but I knew that wasn't right. But let's talk about it. And I'm going to start with a poll that I put out yesterday morning. Obviously, the first thing I asked was who thinks there's going to be a bank run tomorrow, which there wasn't, thankfully. But it was pretty much evenly split, with a lot of people black-pilled enough to think that there would be. 47.7% in the positive and 52.3% in the negative. On the other side, though, and do keep in mind that I had 2 for yeses on this. The yeses had it for who wants to see a bank run. And, I mean, this one didn't get as many votes either, but on a follow-up, who wants to see a bank run, which I said please no, was 45.2%. I do at 9.7%, and Let It All Burn also at 45.2%, meaning Let It All Burn came out at 46.8, or I'm sorry, 54.8, which is just a little bit frightening when you think about what's going on with this. There are enough people, both probably on the left and on the right, that want to see the entire financial system burn. I know Kinzinger was out there trying to blame it all on people on the right, but really honestly, there's a lot going on here. So we're going to talk about what happened first, how it happened, how people are theorizing that it happened, and what the government is going to do next at this point. So we're going to start with the USA Today. After Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank fears of more banks collapsing grow. And this is a live update, but I've got this archived to 3:09 p.m. Eastern Time today. It's been a tumultuous few days for banks since the now shuttered Silicon Valley Bank announced Wednesday it had suffered a $1.8 billion after-tax loss and urgently needed to raise more capital to quell depositors' concerns. By Friday, SVB's chances of getting access to more funding appeared paper-thin. That led the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation to take over the bank after failed attempts to sell it to healthier banks. I don't think they tried to sell it to healthier banks. That's the problem, because there wasn't time. The bank run was happening. Like, it was happening right now. So it needed to be stopped, shut down, before basically anything got worse. Let's see. The FDIC announced Friday that customers who had up to $250,000 per account deposited with SVB, which was the nation's 16th largest bank, would have access to their funds by Monday morning. But it wasn't known at the time what would happen to the deposits that exceeded $250,000, the limit the FDIC insures in the event of a bank failure. Over the weekend, the Federal Reserve, the Treasury Department, and the FDIC announced that SVB and Signature Bank's failures posed a big enough risk to the entire banking system that it merited allowing regulators to take the unusual step of guaranteeing the large deposits. Hence the title of this program, Too Big to Fail 2.0. That's right, we are getting, and first off, they're assuring us that it's not going to be a bailout, and it's not going to be a penny of taxpayer funding, but I mean, we all know better at this point, honestly. One of the first questions they ask is, why did SVB fail? And there are a lot of theories as to why that happened. Silicon Valley's customers, who were largely startups and other tech-centric companies, started becoming needier for cash over the past year. That led them to withdraw money from their accounts. SVB, meanwhile, needed to keep selling its assets, mainly bonds, at a loss, to free up capital so that customers could withdraw funds. But the bank got to a point where that losses were so high, customers began to fear SVB couldn't guarantee access to every customer's funds. That fueled a massive bank run, which caused the FDIC to step in. Now, I'm going to push back a little bit on what USA Today had to say with that, because I don't necessarily think that that's a big portion of what happened. And USA Today they're pushing the narrative that they were selling bonds at a loss. I see no evidence right now that they were selling bonds at a loss. I see none. Yes, they were selling bonds to try to come back and get themselves back into the green, but realistically, it was just a regular bond sale. Etsy payments wound up getting delayed too, which happened to impact Cam Harless of the Mad Ones. E-commerce company Etsy, which delayed payments to about 0.5% of its active sellers on Friday after SVB's collapse, said in a statement that it was working to pay those sellers on Monday. We've already started processing payments via another payment partner this morning, the statement reads. Supporting our sellers is our highest priority, and we understand how important it is for these small businesses to be able to receive their funds when they need them. Biden blames Trump. We already know about that. President Biden pointed fingers at the Trump admin for the collapse of SVB. During the Obama-Biden admin, we put in place tough requirements on banks like Silicon Valley, and the And the Signature Bank included the Dodd-Frank law to make sure the crisis that we saw in '08 would not happen again, man, he said during a White House address on Monday. Unfortunately, the last admin rolled back some of those requirements, he said, referring to measures President Trump signed into law in 2018 aimed at helping small and mid-sized banks compete with larger banks by easing restrictions. What a quiet night tonight, you guys. Where is everybody? Looks like my bitrate is a little bit low, but other than that... Well, we'll keep watching. I'm going to ask Congress and the banking regulators to strengthen the rules for banks to make it less likely that this kind of bank failure will happen again, and to protect American jobs and small businesses, man. And the last one that we'll talk about, which we will also have in its dedicated place, Biden says taxpayers won't foot the bill for SVB and Signature's Bank, which I have a lot of questions about because, well, let's be completely frank about this. The U.S. government doesn't have any money that it didn't get first from you. That's something you have to remember about this. The government does not have anything that it didn't first get from you. So that is what we see for that. Let's grab one from CNN. Why Silicon Valley Bank collapsed and what could it could mean, from Hannah Ziadi. Silicon Valley Bank collapsed with astounding speed on Friday. Investors are now on edge about whether its demise could spark a broader banking meltdown. The federal government has stepped in to guarantee customer deposits, but SVB's downfall continues to reverberate across global financial markets. The government has also shut down Signature Bank, a regional bank that was teetering on the brink of collapse, and guaranteed its deposits. In a sign of how seriously officials are taking the SVB failure, Joe Biden told Americans Monday that they can rest assured that our banking system is safe. We'll do whatever it's needed to stop all this, man. Come on. And this is what they think you should know. First, what is Silicon Valley Bank? Established in 1983, Silicon Valley Bank was just before collapsing America's 16th largest commercial bank. It provided banking services to nearly half of all U.S. venture-backed technology and life and science companies. It also has operations in Canada, China, Denmark, Germany, Ireland, Israel, Sweden, and the UK. SVB has benefited hugely from the tech sector's explosive growth in recent years, fueled by ultra-low borrowing costs and a pandemic-induced boom in demand for digital services. The bank's assets, which include loans, more than tripled from $71 billion at the end of 2019 to a peak of $220 billion at the end of March of 2022. According to financial statements, deposits ballooned from $62 billion to $198 billion over that period, and thousands of tech startups parked their cash at the lender. Its global headcount more than doubled. SVB's collapse came suddenly, following a frenetic 48 hours during which customers yanked deposits from the lender in a classic run on the bank. But the root of the demise goes back several years. Like many other banks, SVB plowed billions into the U.S. government bonds during the era of near zero interest rates. What seemed like a safe bet quickly became unstuck as the Federal Reserve hiked interest rates aggressively to tame inflation. When interest rates rise, bond prices fall, so the jump in rates eroded the value of SVB's bond portfolio. The portfolio was yielding an average 1.79% return last week, far below the 10-year Treasury yield of around 3.9%, Reuters reported. At the same time, the Fed's hiking spree sent borrowing costs higher, meaning tech startups had to channel more cash towards repaying debts. At the same time, they were struggling to raise new venture capital funding. That forced companies to draw down on deposits held by SVB to fund their operations and growth. While SVB's problems can be traced back to its earlier investment decisions, the run on the bank was triggered Wednesday, when the lender announced that it had sold a bunch of securities at a loss and would sell $2.25 billion in new shares to plug the hole in its finances. That set off the panic among customers who withdrew their money in large numbers. The bank stock plummeted 60% on Thursday and dragged other bank shares down with its investors began to fear a repeat of the global financial crisis a decade and a half ago. By Friday, a trading in SVB shares was halted and it had abandoned efforts to raise capital or find a buyer. California regulators intervened, shutting the bank down and placing it in receivership under the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which typically means liquidating the bank's assets to pay back depositors and creditors. U.S. regulators said Sunday they would guarantee all SVB customer deposits. The move is aimed at preventing more bank runs and helping tech companies to continue paying staff and funding their operations. The intervention does not amount to a 2008-style bailout, however, which means investors in the company's stock and bonds will not be protected. Let me be clear that during the financial crisis, there were investors and owners of systemic large banks that were bailed out. And the reforms that have been put in place mean that we're not going to do that again, Janet Yellen told CBS in an interview on Sunday. But we are concerned about the depositors and are focused on trying to meet their needs. Will this trigger a banking crisis? There are already some signs of stress in other banks. Trading in First Republic and PacWest was temporarily halted on Monday after the shares plunged 65% and 52% respectively. Chuck Schwab was down 7% at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday. In Europe, the benchmark stocks Europe 600 Banks Index, which tracks 42 big EU and UK banks, fell 5.6% in morning trade, notching its biggest fall since last March. Shares in embattled Swiss banking giant Credit Suisse were down 9%. SVB isn't the only financial institution whose investments into government bonds and other assets have fallen dramatically in value. At the end of 2022, U.S. banks were sitting on $620 billion in unrealized losses, assets that have decreased in price but haven't been sold yet, according to the FDIC. In a sign that regulators have concerns about wider financial chaos, the Fed said Sunday it would make additional funding available for eligible financial institutions to prevent SVB from collapsing. So, right now, a lot of this is in CYA mode. They're trying to make sure that this doesn't collapse. It does look like there are bigger banks that are on deck to come back and buy it. I don't know if they will or not, but it looks like that there are some that will come back and possibly fill the hole. We'll see. Let's grab one from the Daily Wire. Ben Shapiro explaining his avenue of this. Ben Shapiro. Okay, gang. Here's why Here's why Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. Yeah, we're off to a great start today, folks. From Ben Whitehead. Silicon Valley collapsed because of bad decisions by senior management. But the historic failure was helped along by the Biden admin's disastrous handling of the economy, Ben Shapiro said on his podcast on Monday. Full disclosure, have not listened to. Deficit spending that drove inflation and prompted interest rate hikes by the Federal Reserve, combined with poor investment strategy by the bank, caused the collapse, according to Shapiro. SVB had $200 billion in deposits at the end of the first quarter of 2022, a jump from $60 billion in 2020, which Shapiro attributed to more money being injected into the U.S. economy than at any other time in history. A lot of money went to firms that don't know where to put that money, and so they started shoving it into tech, Shapiro said, adding that the tech boom looked a lot like the tech bubble of 1999, when ridiculously high valuations were placed on unproven companies, okay, gang? I have a wife, she's a doctor. Banks like SVB wound up holding huge amounts of flowing cash, swelling their balance sheets, but instead keeping a liquid cash on hand, SVB and others lent it out to other ventures and bought stocks and bonds. As always, banks made their profit by investing deposits, Shapiro said. To succeed, they need a better return on money they invest than the yield that they promised to depositors. So what exactly did SVB Financial do with this massive influx of cash? Well, they started buying tens of billions of dollars of seemingly safe assets that weren't safe at all. They were seemingly safe, but they weren't safe at all. And the idea that any asset can be safe, okay, gang, in an economy like this, it's ridiculous, okay? The only thing they should be investing in is a daily wire, okay? And Birch Gold. primarily long-term U.S. Treasuries and government-backed mortgage securities, which means that SVB's securities portfolio rose to about $27 billion. That's with a B, folks. In the first quarter of 2022, $128 billion by the end of 2021. Okay, gang? These investments soared when inflation and subsequent interest rate hikes by the Federal Reserve caused the value of the bonds values to drop. The government will then issue bonds at higher rates, wiping out the market for lower rate bonds. And since the long-term notes don't mature for several years, SVB is stuck with them, even as inflation eats away at their underlying value. Once the word of the bank's position got out and depositors wanted their money back, all the bank could do was sell their long-term treasury notes and government-backed securities at a discount that amounted to huge losses that caused the SVB collapse. So, and we're not gonna listen to the Shapiro Show by any stretch of the imagination. But it's interesting that a lot of people are pointing the finger in different directions. I do tend to, can't believe I'm about to say these words. I do tend to agree with Ben on this by looking in and seeing the fact that yes, this is the situation where there was a lot of stuff out there. Like they picked up treasuries like they were going out of style, like they were going to be collector's items one day, and it was easy to make money when everything was at 0% interest, and now they lose value left and right again, because now you're sitting back trying to compete with the federal government and their interest rate, and it's just it's not there anymore. So but realistically, I think there was probably a way out of it if it hadn't been for the fact that they had to sell bonds either way, but there is a part of this that questions whether or not this was coordinated based on the fact that, well, people were told, hey, go back out and take your money out of this. And they did, and it became a self-fulfilling prophecy, just like I said on Friday. From Politico, Barney Frank blames the crypto panic for his bank's collapse. Elizabeth Warren blames Trump. Why? Because of course she does. From Zachary Warmbrot, former Rep. Barney Frank and Senator Elizabeth Warren, the two key architects of the post-08 system of Wall Street regulation, are at odds over what's dragging down the banks once again. Frank, who chaired the House Financial Services Committee in the wake of the global financial crisis and wrote sweeping new rules, enacted in 2010, most recently served on the board of New York's Signature Bank, which regulators shut down on Sunday. From his front row seat, he blames Signature's failure on the panic that began with last year's crypto collapse. His bank was one of the few that served the industry, compounded by a run triggered by the failure of tech-focused Silicon Valley Bank last week. Frank disputes that a bipartisan regulatory rollback, signed into law by former President Trump in 2018, had anything to do with it, even if it was driven by a desire to ease regulations of mid-sized and regional banks like his own. I don't think that had any impact, Frank said in an interview. They hadn't stopped examining the banks. But Warren, a fellow Mass Democrat who designed the landmark consumer safeguards that ended up in Frank's 2010 banking law, is placing the blame firmly on the Trump-era changes that relaxed the oversight of some banks, and says Signature is a prime example of the fallout. Warren argues that had Congress and the Federal Reserve not rolled back stricter oversight, Silicon Valley Bank and Signature would have been better able to withstand financial shocks. Well, my first question about that is, why are you not fixing this at this point? I mean, Democrats had Congress for 2 years, both the House and the Senate. They couldn't fix the rails, and they couldn't fix the deregulation. What were they doing for those 2 years? They should have to meet higher capital standards, and they should be subject to distress tests, and they should have regular supervision that would catch early exactly the kind of mistake that SVB made. Mistakes about failure to hedge risk and mistakes about concentrating in one industry, Warren said in an interview on Monday. The rift between Frank and Warren is just a preview of what's to come as Democrats sort out positions on how to respond to the latest banking crisis, which led to a weekend bailout of depositors at Silicon Valley Bank and Signature. Some, like Warren, want the Washington to restore the tougher regulations that were rolled back in 2018. Some Democrats, like Frank, say the 2018 law isn't the problem. A number of moderates still in Congress helped write the 2018 legislation, including those facing re-election in 2024. So, a few questions about what happened with that. Do I think that the Trump rollback may have played a role in this? Maybe. For me, it's a distinct maybe. I don't think there was malice if he did have some cause into this, but a lot of this comes down to the fact that the regulations are rolled back, and now banks look back and they try to figure out what it is that they can do and what they can get away with, including buying up securities for pennies on the dollar under 0% interest, and then having them wind up being worthless when the interest rate jumps to 7-8%. Let's grab another one from the Daily Wire. Failed SVB criticized for hyper-focus on woke DEI initiatives and LGBTQIRAGIXTBYOM activism. From Amanda Prestigiacomo. Failed Silicon Valley Bank had been hit with accusations that it was hyper-focused on so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and generally managed poorly. SVB, a top 20 bank, relied on the go-to for many tech startups, collapsed over the course of some 40 hours last week, culminating with the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation closing it on Friday and naming the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation as the receiver in an effort to protect its clients. This bank, they're so concerned with DEI and politics and all kinds of stuff. I think that really diverted from them focusing on their core mission. Ron DeSantis told Fox News on Sunday. SVB reportedly failed to have someone in charge of risk assessment for the some 8 months until January of this year, while the person in charge of risk assessment in the UK allegedly prioritized pro-diversity initiatives while neglecting her actual role, according to Daily Mail report. Hey look, we've got our first viewer of the night. Or the first live chatter, I should say. Blind Fear. I think people are burnt out on this story. I'm not going to lie. The bank has pages on its website dedicated to showing off its DEI initiatives and workforce diversity. An inclusive workplace expands opportunities for everyone, the site reads, captioning the charts below. SVB benefits from a diverse workforce, and we aim to continue to increase diverse representation at all levels of the company. Jay Ursapa, Chief Risk Officer for the SVB in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, describes herself as a queer person of color from a working-class background. And organized LGBTQIRAMIGTXTOULTA sometimes Y initiatives, including a month-long Pride campaign, the Daily Mail report outlined. Ursapa also implemented so-called safe space catch-ups for staffers and boasted of serving underrepresented entrepreneurs. Look, I think some of these things are problems. I don't think this is what led to the collapse. Possibly what led to getting employees in who don't have the ability to put in the effort that's required to do something like this. But I don't think that this is what did the collapse. I don't think this is what did them in. So, that is where they're at. Town Hall, with a criticism of the bank itself, coming from, looks like this is coming from Fox News. At C.V. Payne, this was not about bailing out small accounts, regular Americans. This is another bailout of the elites. This is a bailout of Silicon Valley, and the same Silicon Valley that just brought us Sam Bankman-Fried. Let's watch.
But this is an irresponsible, reckless bank. But let's be clear. The American public must know. Every account in this country is insured to $250,000. Every single account. This was not about bailing out small accounts, regular Americans. The mean bank account in this country is $41,000. You want to go by, so if you look at, for instance, the average bank account for someone without a high school diploma, $9,000. Bachelor's degree, $79,000. This is another bailout of the elites. This is a bailout of Silicon Valley, the same Silicon Valley that just brought us Sam Bankman-Fried. The Silicon Valley that for 20 years grew companies privately to exorbitant valuations, outrageous valuations, and then foisted them on the public at even higher valuations. They have made so much money. I mean, only the Saudi Arabian princes can deal with the amount of money that they've made. Who do you think bids against each other for the world's biggest yacht? Who bought the Maltese Falcon? I mean, this is what I'm talking about. So.
Well, and I mean, realistically, that's who's going to benefit from this. I pointed this out on Twitter yesterday too, because I don't want to see a major drop. I don't want to see a major bank run because I think that that's really just going to hurt everybody. And I reminded, just like this guy said, for the vast majority of people who are going to see this video, and there may be, this might get suggested out to a rich person here, someone, they're an entrepreneur. But for the vast majority of people who are going to see this video, your bank account has between $3,000 and $5,000 in it at any given time. Quest Fanning, it might get up to 10. But regardless, that's still far, 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 far below the $250,000 threshold that the FDIC insures to. There is no reason to run a bank run right now because of the fact that your stuff is going to be protected. I have no interest in going out and grabbing the, I'm not going to say how much out of my bank accounts, plural, right now, because I know that it's all covered. If I have to, and I've got enough groceries here that, I can get myself to, I can keep myself fed for the night, and then everything will be available for the next day. It blows that the federal government is the one that's going to do that, and it's taking either from the money printer or from you, the taxpayer, to do it. But no, when they come back out and they say that they're going to guarantee that it's going to be every penny and everybody's going to be made whole, just like he said. And, I'm not the person who blames the elites for all my problems, but that still is a reminder of the fact that, they're the ones who are benefiting from this. But that's what they have for that. Let's grab one from CNN. On the European side, HSBC buys SVB's UK business, ending a nightmare for British tech. From Michelle Toe, Rob North, and Olesya Dimitrikova. HSBC has scooped up the UK arm of failed Silicon Valley Bank, securing the deposits of thousands of British tech firms that hold money at the lender. Had a buyer not been found, SVB UK would have been placed into the insolvency by the Bank of England following the stunning collapse of its parent in the US. Insolvency would have left customers with only deposits worth up to £85,000, or about $100,000, or £170,000, or about $200,000 for joint accounts guaranteed. In a statement, the central bank said it can confirm all depositors' money with SVB UK is safe and secure as a result of this transaction. HSBC, Europe's biggest bank, announced the £1 or $1.2 deal early Monday, saying it would be effective immediately. The acquisition should end the nightmare thousands of tech firms have been experiencing. Over the past few days, Susanna Streeter, head of the money and markets and investment platform Hargreaves Lansdown, said in a statement. SVB UK is a major bank partner for Britain's tech sector, and the failure of its parent sent tech executives scrambling to work out how to get their cash out to pay staff and cover operating expenses, which, by the way, is also what's happening over here. Payroll is due in 2 days for most of these companies. The HSBC rescue is fantastic news for the UK startup ecosystem, said Piotr Pizarz, the CEO of Uncapped. a financial tech startup that lends to other startups. I think we can all relax a bit today, he told CNN. On our side, a couple names that are floated with no guarantees just yet. JP Morgan, PNC among suitors for SVB Holding Company. From Michael Flaherty. JP Morgan and PNC are among the potential suitors in talks to acquire SVB Financial Group in a deal that would exclude the commercial bank currently under the U.S. government control, according to sources familiar with the matter. A buyer for the other SVB divisions could stabilize those businesses, which are being impacted by the collapse of the commercial bank known as SVB Bank. SVB Financial Group announced on Monday that it's launching a strategic alternatives process for the holding company and other assets. The process to sell SVB continued over the weekend, with Reuters reporting potential bidders are cooling on their pursuit. U.S. regulators backstopped the bank on Sunday night. SVB Financial Group is the holding company that, in addition to its SVB Bank business, has three other segments: asset management, private wealth, and a securities business. The process around the holding company is still fluid, sources said, and will continue to play out over the next couple days. Apollo Management and Morgan Stanley are also part of the discussions around the holding company, the sources said. Apollo's interest is expected to center around financing a transaction or acquiring parts of the business they added. After publication, a PNC spokesman said, PNC is not in talks to acquire SVB Financial or Silicon Valley Bank. The three entities, known as SVB Private, SVB Capital, and SVB Securities, are considerably smaller than SVB Bank, now under FDIC control, the company's 2022 10-K says. So, this is not going to be they're not going to come back and buy SVB Bank. But it will do, though, especially with the other arms of this, and the fact that the FDIC is looking to liquidate anything that they can to try to make these accounts whole outside of U.S. taxpayer dollars, is this will go a long way into bridging the gap, especially depending on how much the securities in the other holdings wind up being worth. I'd be interested to see what the final tally is. If what did we have here? JP Morgan were to come up and grab that. And that was one of the names, when I talked to Silentcaster yesterday, that was actually one of the names that came up, was JP Morgan. It'd be interesting to see what the actual price tag is and how far that goes in taking care of the securities that SVB Bank held and how quickly this can go through. Let's grab one from the New York Post. A little bit of the blame game going around. Silicon Valley Bank gave out bonuses just before collapse. From Bruce Golding. SVB workers reportedly received their annual bonuses just hours before the financial institution collapsed, and ahead of an expected Monday morning run by customers desperate for their cash. Employees who agree to stay on with the failed bank also will receive 1.5 times their normal pay for the next 45 days, with hourly workers getting double their normal rate, Axios reported on Saturday. The bonuses for work performed during 2022 were doled out Friday to workers in the U.S., the outlet said. Bonuses for employees in other countries were scheduled for later this month and haven't been paid, Axios also said. The bank traditionally awards bonuses on the second Friday in March, and the payments have been in the works for days, CNBC said. It's unclear how much cash was distributed, but NBC said the bonuses likely ranged from $14,000 each for associates to $140,000 apiece for managing directors, based on figures posted on the Glassdoor website. So, we do have one report that shows what some of the bonuses were. Bill Ackman tweets out, from a source I trust, SVB financial depositors will get a 50% on Monday, Tuesday, and the balance based on realized value over the next 3 to 6 months. If it provides true, I expect there will be bank runs beginning Monday. At a large number of non-SIB banks, no company will take even a tiny chance of losing $1 of deposits, as there's no reward for this risk. Absent a system-wide FDIC government deposit guarantee, more banks' runs begin Monday morning, which thankfully they didn't, by the way. Unusual Whales replies to this, saying, "Bill, this may interest you." Before the collapse, executives sold shares. Gregory Becker, CEO, sold 11% on February 27, 2023. Michael Zucker, counsel, 19% on February 5th. Daniel Beck, CFO, 32% on February 27th. Michael Draper, CMO, 25% on February 1st. So it does kind of seem like they knew something was coming at least. And in a highly rated Silicon Valley bank, I mean, you probably have no problem finding buyers for this stock either. So that's what we have for that. Let's grab one from ABC. Treasury, Fed, and FDIC announced steps to ensure deposits will be paid in full. From Elizabeth Scholes and Molly Nagel. The Federal Reserve, Treasury Department, and Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation announced Sunday that they will make additional funding available to ensure all Silicon Valley Bank deposits, both insured and uninsured, will be paid in full. After receiving a recommendation from the boards of the FDIC and the Federal Reserve, and consulting with President Secretary Yellen, approved actions enabling the FDIC to complete its resolution of Silicon Valley Bank, Santa Clara, California, in a manner that fully protects all depositors, they said in a joint statement. Depositors will have access to all of their money starting on Monday, March 13th. No losses associated with the resolution of Silicon Valley Bank will be borne by the taxpayer, which I don't understand, because that's literally the only place that you get money is from the taxpayer. The Fed also announced it will make additional funding available to eligible depository institutions to help assure banks have the ability to meet the needs of all their depositors. Silicon Valley Bank, the 16th largest bank in the country, failed on Friday and was taken over by the FDIC, which we're aware of, under the most part, of course. After a run on the bank on Wednesday, and customers withdrew $42 billion of deposits by the end of Thursday. SVB mostly served technology workers and startups, including some of Silicon Valley's biggest names, such as Roku. Although, again, reminder that they only had like 20% of what they had in that particular bank. The trio also announced on Sunday a similar systemic risk exception for New York-based Signature Bank, which was closed today by its state chartering authority, according to the joint statement. All depositors of this institution will be made whole, as with the resolution of Silicon Valley Bank, no losses will be borne by the taxpayer. Shareholders and certain unsecured debt holders will not be protected, the statement read. Senior management has also been removed. Any losses to the Deposit Insurance Fund to support uninsured depositors will be recovered by a special assessment on banks as required by law. President Biden issued a statement Sunday on his admin's actions to protect depositors at both banks, expressing his approval for the actions, but stressing he will hold those responsible for this mess accountable for their actions. Yeah, he says that all the time, and he never follows through with it. Like, you don't have the power to do anything about this. It fell, it collapsed. You can go make sure the depositors are made whole, but again, you're going to need taxpayer dollars for that. No matter how many times you lie and say you don't, you're going to need taxpayer dollars for that. Let's see, what else do we have? Fed and FDIC discussing backstop to make SVB depositors whole and stem contagion fears. A source from Kayla Taushi and Jesse Pound. Yeah, and think of all the financial harm that he did over in his time during the Senate. Financial regulators are discussing two different facilities to manage the fallout from the closure of Silicon Valley Bank if no buyer materializes, according to a source close to the situation. Can Can you actually still buy this? I thought once the FDIC took over, it was done. One way the regulators would step in would be to create a backstop for uninsured deposits at the Silicon Valley Bank, using an authority from the Federal Deposit Insurance Act. According to the source, the move would also touch the systemic risk exception that allows the Fed to take extraordinary actions to stem contagion fears. Such a move could spur confidence at similar regional banks and institutions ahead of Monday when they open and customers can withdraw from their accounts. An additional step would be a general banking facility from the Federal Reserve that would support other financials with direct exposure to SVB so they wouldn't have to materially change their business or take steep losses. The moves would likely only be necessary if the FDIC was unable to find a buyer for all of SVB, or at least key parts of it. Bloomberg News reported that the FDIC was holding an auction for the bank, with final bids due on Sunday. Regulators shut down Silicon Valley Bank on Friday, we know. Tens of millions in customer deposits were withdrawn on Thursday. In a run on the bank, there's been a concern among investors that other mid-sized banks could face similar pressure without federal support. Sounds like a them problem. U.S. regulators say SVB customers will be made whole. A second bank fails. We talked enough about that one here. Let's move on to the Hill. And some reaction to this. Nikki Haley attacks Biden over bailout of Silicon Valley Bank. From Julia Mueller. First woman of color to be a Republican presidential candidate, Nikki Haley, attacked President Biden on Monday over what she called a bailout of Silicon Valley Bank, which collapsed late last week after regulators seized the failed bank's assets and promised to make depositors full. Joe Biden is pretending this isn't a bailout. It is, Haley said on Twitter. Please don't make me agree with Nikki Haley. Please don't make me agree with Nikki Haley. Please don't make me agree with Nikki Haley. The admin moved Sunday to use emergency measures to give depositors access to their full funds, drawing from the Deposit Insurance Fund, a banking industry-sponsored fund, so that no losses will be borne by the taxpayers, Biden said. Biden has underscored that the federal government isn't bailing the bank out, echoing assurances of the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. The president stressed that the U.S. banking system is safe amid the last few days of uncertainty. But Haley, a former South Carolina governor of the UN, argued that the now depositors at the healthy banks are forced to subsidize Silicon Valley's bank's mismanagement, and said the bank's assets should be sold off. When the deposit insurance fund runs dry, all bank customers are on the hook. That's a public bailout. Depositors should be paid by selling off Silicon Valley's bank's asset, not by the public. Taxpayers should not be responsible, Haley said in a tweet. And again, I don't really understand where it is that Brandon says that the money's coming from. We'll talk about this in just a second. Because again, I remind you, the government doesn't have anything it didn't first take from you, the taxpayer. From USA Today, banking crisis, President Biden says taxpayer money won't be used to bail out SVB and Signature Bank. From Francesca Chambers. Okay, well, again, where are you going to get the money from? President Brandon sought to calm market and taxpayer jitters early Monday, saying Americans can have confidence in the banking system after the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. Americans can have confidence that the banking system is safe. Your deposits will be there when you need them. Do we have a word on where the money is going to come from? Not a word. Except for, we will do whatever's needed. Come on, man. Let's see what else we have here. The back turner. Can you assure Americans there won't be a ripple effect? Can you expect other banks to fail? Bye-bye.
President, what do you know right now about why this happened? And can you assure Americans that there won't be a ripple effect?
Do you expect other banks to fail, Mr. President?
Should all depositors be protected at all banks?
All right, thank you, Mr. President. What do you know right now about why this happened? And can you assure Americans that there won't be a ripple effect?
And I love how he never gets called on that either. Like, they started asking questions, and there was a Biden-shaped cloud of smoke behind that podium where Biden used to be. Phew. He's gone. What else do we have? A little bit of conversation about how the media is handling this as well. O'Keefe Reborn says, "Don't panic," says Joe Biden. Caught on tape discussing how to use the media to prevent a bank run. Today, 3:13, amidst the total collapse of the world economy. Signature Bank, First Republic Bank, hashtag bank crash, hashtag bank run, hashtag bank runs, hashtag total collapse, hashtag economy. Let's listen.
They're calling it the biggest bank collapse since the 2008 financial crisis.
Go into your account, take your money out as soon as possible.
Like all the money's gone and a collapse is imminent. But we have to stay calm and think of ways to prevent a bank run so we can get ours. Let's ensure that all banks are flocking, talking with each other and sharing information in real time using the back channels we set up in October. And let's use the full force of the media to calm the public and to assure them that their deposits are safe. We may not be able to prevent a collapse, but if we work together, we can limit the fallout for us and preserve the continuity of government.
They're calling it the biggest bank collapse since the 2008.
I don't know if I buy that one. I think that one might be a deep fake. And it also says the account tweeting this is a parody account. Garrett says this is an AI-generated voice. Also says, sorry, this tweet has been deleted. I wonder what happens if I refresh this. This page doesn't exist. All right. I'll be the first one to admit I got taken in by a parody account. It happens sometimes. Thomas Massey, though, not a parody account. Thomas Massey talking about just got off a Zoom meeting with the Fed, Treasury, FDIC, House, and Senate. A Democrat senator essentially asked whether there was a program in place to censor information on social media that could lead to a run on the banks. His name. In a Substack. With one person pushing back on this. I'm as anti-censorship as it gets, but spreading unfounded rumors to promote a run on the banks is one of the very few instances where the yelling fire in a crowded theater analogy actually does apply. Well, I'm going to say right off the bat that that's not the same thing. Yes, there was a self-fulfilling prophecy. There was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or SVB. But the people should have the right to make the decision for themselves and have all the information available to them. From the Daily Wire. Dem senator asked about censoring info that would cause a bank run, Massey says. From Myreed Elordi. Thomas Massey said Sunday that at least one Democrat senator wanted to censor what information is available to the public in the wake of the Silicon Valley Bank's collapse last week. We read the tweet already. Did they tell us who it is? Did they name names? Massey said, the response to the Democrat senator's question was, we will get back to you on that. Massey replying to the one that we looked at too over on the tweet. Spreading unfounded rumors to promote a run on the bank is akin to yelling fire in a crowded theater. What about yelling fire in a theater that's actually on fire? Massey replied. But again, they won't name names, so a part of this is unnamed source and just trust us, bro. I like Massey, but if you're going to make an allegation like this, I need a name. I 100% need a name on that one. From CBS. With video, Yellen rules out bailout for Silicon Valley. We're not going to do that again. Oh, but you are. Let's listen. We might not be able to listen. It's one of these big companies that doesn't let me watch video from them, and I think it's CBS. Now that I see the screen just go dead black. Alright. Well, we're going to move off of Silicon Valley Bank and go on to the other. In fact, this doesn't belong up here. This actually belongs all the way down here. Alright, we've got an op-ed from the Wall Street Journal then. Now that I have everything organized the way that I want it. SVB doesn't deserve a taxpayer bailout. From Vivek Ramaswamy, presidential candidate. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen announced Sunday that Silicon Valley's uninsured depositors would gain access to the deposits on Monday. The FDIC insures only deposits up to $250,000. The bailout creates incentives for risky behavior, teaching large depositors that they can throw money at risky banks without diversifying or conducting diligence. SVB being lobbied for looser risk limits by arguing that its failure wouldn't create systemic risk and thus didn't merit special intervention by the U.S. government, yet on Sunday, the Treasury deemed SVB systemically important. To the extent that failing to make SVB's uninsured depositors whole would have heightened the risk of a run on other banks, the Federal Reserve should have played its role as lender of last resort. Another option would have been to increase the FDIC coverage limit to a level that would avert a run, shoring up public confidence in other U.S. banks without showing favoritism towards SVB. SVB's situation is different than that of most U.S. banks. Only 11% of its deposits were insured. While the operating accounts of small businesses often exceeded the FDIC limit, large banks usually sweep the excess into cash management programs that buy treasury bills and other securities, which, by the way, is how we got into this mess in the first place. As the nation's 16th largest bank, SVB simply chose not to do so. What? Hold on. Vivek, do you even have any idea what's going on here right now? Because that's legitimately why we're here right now. Is because they were using the deposits that they had in the larger accounts to buy up securities at pennies on the dollar at 0% interest. And then holding them when interest jumped to 8%. That's literally the reason that we're here. Is because of treasury bills. For some reason, Roku, the publicly traded maker of streaming devices, had a $487 million balance with the bank. Well, they're in Silicon Valley. It's local for them, and it's a bank that specializes in tech. I don't know what the mystery is. I'm honestly going to come out and say at this point, Vivek Ramaswamy has no idea what he's talking about. I might be able to go down into the rest of the article and find an opposition to that, but in the first 3 paragraphs, it's very clear that he has no idea what he's on about. From U.S. News and World Report. GOP divided over federal response to SVB failure. From Claire Hansen. Republican lawmakers and 2024 presidential candidates are divided over federal regulators' decision to intervene Sunday after the failure of California's Silicon Valley Bank, with some praising the move, while others slam the Biden admin over its actions and attempt to turn the conversation towards the culture war issues that have become the party's rallying cry. Let's see. Biden on Monday said that the depositors would be protected. The message stood in sharp contrast to former President Trump's commentary on the situation. Trump, who is the current frontrunner for the 2024 presidential nomination, laid the blame at Biden's feet and referenced the president's proposed federal budget while predicting a massive looming depression. With what is happening to our economy and with the proposals being made on the largest and dumbest tax increase in the history of the USA times 5, Joe Biden will go down as the biggest Herbert Hoover of the modern age, and we have a Great Depression far bigger and more powerful than that of 1929. As proof, the banks are already starting to collapse. Trump said in a post strewn with capital letters and some grammatical and spelling errors on his social media site Truth Social. Then on Monday, Trump reposted several posts from a Republican commentator criticizing the move and calling SVB woke. Where's the bailout for East Palestine houses that have plunged in value, the farmland that's poisoned, the restaurants and businesses that people won't visit anymore? They're all left to die. It's the worst. And if you're woke big tech, you get every dollar you need every single weekend, one post said, referencing the train derailment. Woke banks fail, woke people will fail, woke schools will fail. Everything woke turns to shit, another post read. The tack is similar to one taken by Ron DeSantis. Though DeSantis has not officially declared his candidacy, he is considered Trump's stiffest competition for the GOP nomination. DeSantis used the news of SVB's failure to further criticize corporations that have diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Nikki Haley, we talked about that one earlier. Vivek Ramaswamy wrote an op-ed that was rife with legal errors. Congress was much more fractured, though, however. GOP reps aligned with Trump and with the more populist wing of the party were harshly critical of the actions. Marjorie Taylor Greene posted a slew of messages on the subject, melding together the culture wars, Republican criticism of Biden over the Ohio train spill, and criticism of the Fed. The Fed is extending loans against high-quality assets to banks for nearly zero interest to prevent a run on the banks on Monday. All because SVB didn't insure over 89% of their deposits and instead hedged on failing funds that offered a sustainable finance and carbon-neutral operations to support a healthier planet, she said in the post. In other words, the fools running the bank were woke and almost became broke, but the Democrats and Fed swooped in to make sure their woke donors at the SVB don't go under. McCarthy told Fox News that the federal government has the ability to cope with a failure. But should they? That's the question. Well, they do have the tools to handle the current situation. They do know the seriousness of this, and they are working to try to come forward with some announcement before the markets open. And I'm hopeful that something can be announced today to move forward. This bank is a unique bank where they do have assets. They have amazing clientele, McCarthy told the network on Sunday before the government announced its plan. And a little bit of that is suck up because I think some of the clientele of that bank is his constituency. So, we've got some saying it's the right thing to do and some saying hell no. From Time, GOP aims for Tea Party style outrage over woke bailouts of banks. From Minnie Racker, the largest bank failure in American history happened in 2008, at the height of the Great Recession and the big bank bailouts that helped birth the major right-wing movement. The second and third largest ones happened last week. Federal regulators moved quickly on Friday to take over Silicon Valley Bank after it became insolvent, so we know that. I think this is a review of the last one. We'll skip this one. It's time anyway. Nancy Mace doesn't support a bailout for Silicon Valley Bank. Elizabeth Warren criticizes overnight bailout of SVB customers while leaving millions of student loan borrowers in limbo, from Eilert Sheffy. And that is because Elizabeth Warren only has one trick. It's been a whirlwind for the banking system over the past few days. Mass Senator Elizabeth Warren wrote on Monday an opinion piece for the New York Times, a former newspaper, that what happened to SVB is the direct result of leaders in Washington weakening the financial rules referring to former President Trump's rollback provisions within the Dodd-Frank Act. On Sunday night, regulators announced they would ensure that all deposits at SVB and Signature would be repaid 100 cents on the dollar. Not just small businesses and nonprofits, but also billion-dollar companies, crypto investors, and the very venture capital firms that triggered the bank run on SVB in the first place. All in the name of preventing further contagion. Regulators have said the banks, rather than taxpayers, will bear the cost of the federal backstop. No, they won't. Required to protect deposits. We will see if that's true. But it's no wonder the American people are skeptical of a system that holds millions of struggling student loan borrowers in limbo, but steps in overnight to ensure that billion-dollar crypto firms won't lose a dime in deposit. Well, I'm kind of in the same camp there, as I think that they should have just been made to deal with their own assets. Why do I have this up here again? We read that already, all the way back with Thomas Massey. A little bit of the market reaction. Wall Street pummels regional banks despite Biden's assurances. From Ellison Morrow. Wall Street's confidence in regional banks remains shaky on Monday despite emergency measures from the Biden admin to protect customer deposits. First Republic shares fell more than 60% and were briefly halted for volatility. Western Alliance Bancorp stocks fell 47% and PacWest Bancorp fell more than 20%. The SPDR S&P Regional Banking Exchange Traded Fund fell 12%. Monday's turmoil for bank stocks stems from the collapse on Friday of Silicon Valley Bank. Rather than bailing out the bank, the Biden admin and federal regulators on Sunday said that they would backstop customer deposits, even those that weren't insured, which is a bailout, by the way. The same protections would be in place for customers of Signature, a New York regional lender that folded when depositors were apparently spooked by SVB's demise. By guaranteeing all deposits, even the uninsured money that customers kept with the failed banks, the government aimed to prevent more bank runs and help companies that deposited large sums with the banks continue to make payroll and fund their operations. The Fed will also make additional funding available for eligible financial institutions to prevent runs on similar banks in the future. Despite those emergency measures to avoid an 08-style crisis, investors sold off shares of regional banks that are seen as having similar risk potential. And yeah, it showed. And there had to be a boom in other industries in order for the Dow to stay up where it was throughout the day yesterday, or today as well. From Seeking Alpha, why did First Republic Bank stock crash today? Contagion fears spread across banks. First Republic stock tumbled as much as 78% on Monday after actions taken by federal regulators to ease market jitters surrounding contagion in the banking sector failed to provide the regional lender relief. Failures of SIVB and Signature Bank sparked fears among investors about the health of smaller-sized banks. Raymond James earlier downgraded First Republic to market perform from strong buy, as its earnings power could be negatively impacted if net deposit outflows were to come to fruition. On the flip side, KBW named FRC a safe haven stock with 73% upside potential. Yeah, I wouldn't go anywhere near it. Not official financial advice, by the way. On Sunday, First Republic got improved its financial position through access to additional liquidity from the Federal Reserve and JP Morgan Chase. Which I'm guessing means that JP Morgan Chase is probably going to go buy that one. From Fox Business. Signature Bank shut down in connection with Silicon Valley Bank collapse. From Bradford Betts. Federal regulators on Sunday said the New York-based Signature Bank was being shut down to protect consumers and the financial system following the collapse of California's Silicon Valley Bank. The announcement came in a joint statement from the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve and the FDIC. The regulators said SVB clients will have access to the money starting Monday at no expense to the American taxpayer. Again, the first question there is, where does the money come from? A similar program, they said, was being enacted for Signature Bank, which was closed Sunday by its state chartering authority. All depositors of this institution will be made whole, the joint statement read. As with the resolution of Silicon Valley Bank, no losses will be borne by the taxpayer. A spokesman for Signature declined to comment. Founded in 2001, the New York-based Signature Bank was popular among crypto companies. The institution provided deposit services for its clients' digital assets, but did not make loans collateralized by them. Leading up to SVB's collapse, the bank said that they've been trying to reduce these deposits. As recently as Thursday, Signature said it was well-diversified financial position and had limited digital asset-related deposit balances in the wake of industry developments. We want to make it clear again that Signature is a well-diversified, full-service commercial bank with more than 2 decades of history and a solid performance serving the middle-market businesses, Joseph J. DiPaolo, Signature Bank co-founder and chief executive officer, said in a statement. We have built a strong reputation serving commercial clients through 9 business lines and reached in excess of $100 billion in assets by continually executing our single point of contact, relationship-based model where banking teams are capable of meeting all client needs. Signature was notable for having former Democrat Congressman Barney Frank on its board. Frank's signature Dodd-Frank Act, crafted in the wake of the 2008 financial crash, sought to improve accountability and transparency in the financial system. Under the law, banks with assets in excess of $50 billion were deemed as being potentially too big to fail, and were therefore subject to a host of rigorous testing and regulation. So, another one going down. Mysteriously, by the way, and a few other commenters have pointed this out as we go, that one of the big things to look at is the interest in crypto in all these banks. Because it seems First Republic had a lot of its business done in crypto, with Silicon Valley Bank being in Silicon Valley, it did deal a lot in crypto, and now Signature Bank, which says one of its leading markets is crypto. We've got a few things to watch with that. From CNBC. Why regulators seize Signature Bank in 3rd biggest bank failure in U.S. history. From Hugh Sun. On Friday, Signature Bank customers, spooked by the sudden collapse of Silicon Valley, withdrew more than $10 billion in deposits. That run in deposits quickly led to the 3rd largest bank failure in U.S. history. Regulators announced late Sunday that Signature was being taken over to protect its depositors and the stability of the U.S. financial system. The sudden move shocked executives of Signature, a New York-based institution with deep ties to real estate and legal industries, said board member and former U.S. Rep. Barney Frank. Signature had 40 branches, assets of around $110.36 billion, and deposits of $88.59 billion at the end of 2022, according to a regulatory finding. We had no indication of problems until we got a deposit run late Friday, which was purely contagion from SVB, Frank told CNBC in a phone interview. Problems for U.S. banks with exposure to the frothiest asset classes of the pinko-pox pandemic, crypto and tech startups boiled over last week with the wind-down of crypto-centric Silvergate Bank. While that firm's demise had long been expected, it helped ignite a panic around banks with high levels of uninsured deposits. Venture capital investors and founders drained their Silicon Valley Bank accounts Thursday, leading to seizure by midday Friday. So that is why they see his signature as well. And the response. Markets now. Matt Egan says the Fed needs to stop raising rates now. Former FDIC chair says after Silicon Valley Bank failure. Again, my problem with this, and just like I said at the top, onto the finance sector, I think that's going to have the opposite effect of what you want. Now, Biden says, and Yellen says also, that nothing that's going to happen here today is going to be borne by the taxpayer. That means that money printer is about to go burr. Which means when money printer goes burr, that means that money gets valued at less and less and less. Which drives the inflation, which, if you go back to no hikes and even shrinkages at this point, we're sitting at a point where, I'm sorry, we're going to start to see that inflation come right back and roaring back again. Are you ready to see 9% again? I'm not. This is from Matt Egan. Sheila Bair, a top banking regulator during the 2008 financial crisis, says the stunning implosion of SVB is exactly why the Federal Reserve needs to halt its war on inflation. The Fed needs to hit pause and assess the full impact of its actions so far before raising short rates further, Bair, the former chair of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, told CNN on Sunday in a phone interview. If they paused, it would have a settling effect in the markets, said Bair, who led the FDIC through the 2008 failure of Washington Mutual. SVB is second only to Washington Mutual in terms of the biggest bank failures in U.S. history. Before Friday, investors were anticipating a major interest rate hike of half percentage point at the Fed's March 21st to 22nd meeting. Bair said a hike of that size would not be well advised given the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. Similarly, Goldman Sachs told clients late Sunday that in light of the stress of the banking system, the bank no longer expects the Federal Reserve to deliver a rate hike next week. Goldman, however, still expects a rate hike in the quarter point in the Fed's May, June, and July meetings, though it added there is considerable uncertainty about the path. To fight inflation, the Fed has aggressively lifted interest rates at a pace unseen since the early 80s. Those rate hikes have contributed to the collapse of Silicon Valley in the past at least two key ways. First, higher borrowing costs rocked the frothy parts of the U.S. economy, especially the tech industry that Silicon Valley Bank catered to. Second, the Fed's rate hikes undermined the value of the treasury bonds that banks rely on as a central source of capital. When the money gets tighter, financial assets lose value. That has to be carefully managed, said Bair, who led the FDIC during the wave of bank failures during the 2008 global financial crisis. As of the end of last year, U.S. banks were sitting on $620 billion in unrealized losses, assets that have lost value but haven't been sold yet, according to FDIC data. Silicon Valley locked up $1.8 billion of losses on bonds it held last week as it rushed to sell securities in a bid to shore up its balance sheet. But news of the need to raise cash spooked customers. Yeah, we saw that. It's a bank run. From what I can tell, the assets are good quality if held to maturity, but humans are humans. And again, I disagree. I want to borrow money and buy a house. But curbing that interest rate right now is financial suicide. You might as well just light it all on fire because that's going to be what's keeping you warm next winter. I hate to tell you. And the last one, just a little aside from the Daily Wire, latest bank to fail refused then President Trump's business in 2021. From Greg Wilson. Kind of sounds to me like they shouldn't have been refusing anyone's business at this point. Former President Trump might be glad Signature refused his business following the Capitol Selfie Fest, now that the New York-based lender is the latest institution to be shut down by regulators. Word that the New York State regulators had closed down the bank came on Sunday, just 2 days after the California-based Silicon Valley bank collapsed. The activity has generated fears that jittery depositors could try to withdraw their savings from lenders around the country. Their statement: "We witnessed the president encouraging the rioters and refraining from calling the National Guard to protect the Congress in its performance of duty," Signatures said in a statement at the time. "At this point in time, to ensure the peaceful transition of power, we believe the appropriate action would be to the resignation of the president, which is in the best interest of our nation and the American people." Which, by the way, was 2 weeks before his term was set to expire. And now, well, they have nothing. They don't have a pot to piss in. Alright, let's get to some other stuff here before we head out of here for the day. Not a lot of live chatter in here, so unless that starts to pick up here, we might not have a live chat segment. Although I'll still go through and read the names of everybody throughout the week. In spite of the fact that I forgot to write them down because I'm so used to doing this on Friday, I can still get access to the names of everybody who chatted in the live chat. I still have access to that. But we'll go for a little bit more before we get to there. Let's talk about El Paso. Let's talk about something other than banking. Because what did we do? Almost 139 on finance? Alright, from the Citizens Free Press, showing us a video of what happened in El Paso. Chaos at the border with Juarez, Mexico, as more than 1,000 migrants stormed the Mexican side of the El Paso del Norte Bridge. Let's watch. Can I just point out the irony of people rioting, going towards a bridge, rushing a bridge that has Happy Travels written over the top of it? Can I just talk about the irony of that for just a moment? That's funny. From CBS. Rumor sends hundreds of migrants rushing for U.S. border at El Paso, but they hit a wall of police. No author given. Hundreds of people tried to storm the U.S.-Mexico border on Sunday after a rumor that migrants would be allowed to cross into the U.S. Around noon, a large crowd of mainly Venezuelans began to gather near the entrance of a bridge connecting Mexico's Ciudad Juarez to El Paso in the southern U.S. Frustrated by delays and difficulties in applying for asylum after journeys of thousands of miles long through Central America and Mexico, some told AFP they thought they would be allowed entry because of a supposed Day of the Migrant celebration. I heard a rumor. It's funny that I'm watching Umbrella Academy right now, which that's one of the central points of one of the main characters there. I heard a rumor. Allison's power is when she says that, she essentially hypnotizes whoever she says it to. Like, into one action, I think. Like, as simple as, to her brother, I heard a rumor you punched yourself in the face, and then Diego turns around and punches himself in the face. To something a little bit more dangerous, like I heard a rumor I blew your mind, to enemy combatants who then have their minds explode in a bloody aneurysm. I heard a rumor that it was a day of celebration and we could just go rush the border. Yeah, good luck with that. Tell me how that works out for you. Images on social media showed a group that included many women and children running towards the border shouting, "To the USA! A los Estados Unidos! Los Estados Unidos. Lo siento. I'm out of practice. Give me a break." They quickly encountered barbed wire, orange barricades, and police with shields. U.S. border guards, of course, moved to close the bridge, said Enrique Valenzuela, a civil society worker who helps migrants in Juarez. Jackson Solis, a 23-year-old Venezuelan, was among those who came to the bridge on Sunday to see if the rumors were true. We all ran and put a fence with barbed wire around us. They threw tear gas at us, he said. Solis told the AFP that he'd been waiting 6 months to try to schedule an appointment to apply for asylum in the U.S., where he wants to work. Appointments must now be booked through a Customs and Border Protection mobile app that was introduced this year, as asylum seekers were required to apply in advance rather than upon arrival. The Biden admin has been hoping to stem the record tide of migrants and asylum seekers undertaking often dangerous journeys, organized by human smugglers to get to the U.S. In January, the White House proposed expanding a controversial rule to allow border guards to turn away more would-be migrants if they arrive by land. Do not just show up at the border. We've got one from the BBC as well. Frustrated migrants storm border between Mexico and El Paso. This is a review of what we already read, so we'll actually skip over this one. Some Mazel Tovs are in order. Are we ready for that? From the New York Post. Lauren Boebert, 36, reveals she will be a grandmother. I actually did not think that I was older than Lauren Boebert. I am, depending on when her birthday is, I am 2 to 3 years older than she is. I didn't realize that. From Ronnie Reyes. Life comes at you fast. Lauren Boebert has announced that her 17-year-old son Tyler and his girlfriend are expecting a child next month. Boebert broke the happy news while speaking Tuesday at an event hosted by the conservative groups Moms for America, where she touted the values of her rural countrymen. I'm going to tell you all for the first time in a public setting that not only am I the mom of 4 boys, but come April, I'll be a Gigi to a brand new grandson, said Boebert, who added that she and her husband Jason are so excited to welcome this new life into our family. And she is being ripped for this for reasons unknown. I mean, this is a happy situation. It may not have been the best situation for both, but I mean, we're also not talking middle of the inner city college student who has no other means or ways to do anything. And even those people make it work. This is a wealthy family. You know, teenagers did things that teenagers do. No laws were broken. A lot of people are trying to say this is pedophilia. They're 2 years apart. They're the same age, essentially. And congratulations should be in order. Do I think that everybody involved wishes that this would have gone a different way? Probably. But it's a new life to be celebrated, and I'm happy for it. I think the kid was an idiot and stuck his thingy where it didn't belong without protection. But you can't go back and undo what you've done. And that's plain and simple. A little bit of a personal anecdote on this for me. When my third fiance and I first got together, like first got together, like this was within the first few months, she had come to me with symptoms other than having missed, swearing up and down that she was pregnant. She wasn't. She didn't wind up being pregnant. But she'd asked me after she had taken the test, she's like, why didn't you freak out about this? I'm like, because it's already done. Like, we can't go back and undo what happened. Just like these kids. Yes, I'm sure that, you know, both the kids that are involved in this are kind of thinking to themselves, man, this is going to make it difficult to go to college. It's not. He's the son of a congresswoman. It's not going to make it difficult. and an entrepreneur in the local community as well. So even if she loses out of Congress, she's got the fame and the wherewithal to go back and start another business. These are not people who are going to be hurting for money or resources. If both of these kids still want to go to college, it's going to be a feasibility for them. Plain and simple. But even if this was a thing where they went back and said, oh, well, I wish we hadn't done that right now, it's too late for that. So, do the best that you can. Raise the baby, which it sounds like they're going to. They're going to raise it together. So, I'm happy for them. And I'm happy for the new life. Let's see. I'm going to do these two, and then we're going to head out of here for the day. Well, first I'll look through the live chat from the last week as well. From CNBC, Meta exploring a new social network that could compete with Twitter. You already have one of those. It's called Facebook. And it failed to compete with Twitter. From Rohan Goswami. Meta is exploring a new decentralized text-based social network that could compete with Elon Musk's Twitter. Tech newsletter Platformer reported the project, codenamed P92, would be built as a standalone app, but that users would log in using their Instagram credentials. The move could help Meta attract some of the Twitter users who are looking for alternatives after Musk took over and changed some of the site's rules. We're exploring a standalone decentralized social network for sharing text updates, a Meta spokesperson told CNBC on Friday. We believe there's an opportunity for a separate space where creators and public figures can share timely updates about their interests. Which, I mean, would be cool, and I would probably go and join it. I may not use Facebook anymore for reasons of, well, mostly vast depression. So I may not use that anymore, but like I use Instagram all the time. It's probably one of my favorite networks. Because I can see good-looking girls, religious updates, cool welding projects, car projects, all in the same place. And for the most part, I really, after purging a few of the people out of the timeline that I didn't need to have in there, I can take a break from politics and news by going to Instagram and actually look at my interests, not just be bombarded by politics and news constantly. The effort by Meta would expand its offerings beyond Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram, and into a space that's been dominated by Musk's Twitter. The project is being led by Instagram head Adam Mosseri, a platformer said. Decentralized social networks like Mastodon or Dorsey-backed Blue Sky rely on individual servers, which use a uniform protocol avoiding centralized control of the content and possible censorship. It's not clear how long Meta has been working on the P92 project, or whether the company has moved into the development process. Money Control, which first broke the story, cited a person familiar with the matter who said the idea was still a work in progress. Well, I mean, it's going to be a copycat no matter what. It's probably going to have limited characters, but have a chance that you can... Well, and that was one of the things with Twitter, too, is, I mean, you had to know most of the people that you were on with. As it grew, they made fan pages, but for the most part, in order to actually connect with somebody, you had to know the person. And to be able to communicate with the person, you had to know the person. Whereas Twitter, it's just like, oh, we'll if you follow a few people that you know or find a few handles that you want to follow, we'll start recommending, and you can get right down the rabbit hole wherever you want to be. Yeah, it probably is going to be info gathering. It's Twitter. I'm sorry, it's not Twitter. It's, what am I thinking? Zuckerberg. That's what it is. And the last one, some news on the Donald. From the Daily Wire, Trump song with J6 Prison Choir, Justice for All, reaches #1 on iTunes. from Ben Whitehead. Former President Trump's new debut single with the J6 Prison Choir, Justice for All, has surpassed career musicians like Miley Cyrus, Tim McGraw, and Morgan Wallen on the iTunes charts as of Saturday. Is Tim McGraw still on the top of the iTunes charts? Really? Released in early March, the song is a tribute to the prisoners of January 6 Selfie Fest. It includes roughly 20 prisoners singing the national anthem and a recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance by former President Trump. The ending of the song includes the prisoners chanting, USA. J6 Prison Choir consists of individuals who have been incarcerated as a result of their involvement in the January 6 Selfie Fest. After President Trump stated, "I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard." The J6 Prison Choir website states, "The J6PC continues to make their voices heard through the power of music and sings the Star-Spangled Banner every evening before bed." The song was released on iTunes, Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. Proceeds from the song go to certain J6 families in need, a press release from Kash Patel, a former Trump official who played a role in recording the song, said. The J6 Prison Choir reportedly asked a former President Trump to take part in the project. A campaign advisor told CNN the song doesn't have anything to do with Trump's presidential campaign. Oh, but it does. Do I like that this is happening? Yes. Do I like that these people are getting their voices heard? Yes. Do I think this has nothing to do with the campaign? No, you are out of your mind if you think that. Of course it has something to do with the campaign. Everything that that man does has something to do with raising his public profile in one way or another. And now he can get up on the soapbox and grandstand and say, these people whose worst thing that they ever did was follow me. That's not that bad of a thing to do. And now being political prisoners, and I'm sitting here, I'm helping them get their voices heard. Me, your favorite president. Of course this is a campaign stop. Everybody knows this is a campaign thing. Now, will this help get attention to the fact that they're in there still? Maybe, maybe not. And of course their detractors are going to continue to say that they deserve to be in there. And they don't deserve to be bailed out. They don't deserve to have bail. They need to sit in there in prison forever without trial because they stood against the predominant narrative of the US government. Which is lame. Alright. So we'll get live chat for the day and head out of here. Which it looks like, again, it was a slow day for that, but we'll still look and see, even though, again, I 100% completely forgot to write everything down. I still have access to that information, so let's get into the analytics. It's a little bit slow to do it this way, but we'll still get it done. So let's bring this over here. You guys will see a little bit of behind the scenes stuff that I do over here. So we're live right now. For whatever reason, it still has the old title on. Did the titles take? Is that why nothing is on? I don't know. Actually, let me actually go check everything else. No, everything else had its tags changed. $776, Too Big to Fail 2.0. Talk shows and podcasts over on Twitch. Alright, let's have a look at what's happening here, though. March 11th, March 10th, March 9th, March 8th. March 7th, though, is where we start. Right? Let me think about that for a second. Oh, because 11th was Saturday, so 10th was Friday, 9th was Thursday, 8th was Wednesday, 7th was Tuesday, 6th was Monday, and then, yeah, it goes back to 4th. So we did Monday's live chat already. So now we'll take some time and look into Tuesdays. Alright, Tuesday's top chatters were Ron Helton, Spartan 0000 Subhuman, KTZed, R Volt 24, Grant, Ron Helton, Luke Wee, and I had a YT Tyler McQuaid who came in and joined us for one message as well. Let's look in on Tuesday, or Wednesday rather. This is like flying along compared to how it usually does. Yeah, I know. I didn't sleep much last night, so. I wonder too, by the way, if, Top Chatters Wednesday, Mr. Scott, who's here with us right now. Beat me up, Mr. Scott, with 72 messages. Ron Helton, Midget B, Luke Wee, Blind Fear, and the R-Rated Conservative Podcast joined us. On that, I think that was that fateful day that I forgot to turn my microphone on after the cold open. March 9th, Thursday. Our top chatters were Ron Helton, Mr. Scott, Grant, Luke Wee, and another one from the other Ron Helton, who came in over on the YouTube side. On Friday, after I happened to leave my stream on when I went to go get fish, I raided and then I dipped and went and got fish. And I got hammered while I was out getting fish, and I was just about to go to bed, and I got a message from Ron Helton reminding me that the stream was still on. Friday, Spartan, Mr. Scott, Ron Helton, Seawall, KTZed, Grant, and Luke Wee. And today, which was quite slow, and I think I know why, by the way. I do think that I know why I'm slow, because when I went on live on Saturday, I got a little bit frustrated with the anti-Semitism talk, which is, I mean, when Ron does it, it's usually when somebody else brings it up in the conversation. He doesn't lead with it. But for Spartan, he has been just, every time he comes in, it has been non-stop. And I finally looked at, because I was playing Legend of Zelda. I wasn't doing anything news, anything right-wing, and the first thing that he did was came in and number one, promoted 2 different new tech channels, which that gets you banned from other people's streams. Self-promo and promo of others, that gets you banned in most everywhere but here. But then just like day in and day out, it's like, oh, Israel's doing this, it's Israel, and you have to be collectivist. And I'm not collectivist, I'm an individualist. And no amount of screaming from a live chatter is going to change that. It's not. I always have been. I've always been an individualist. And I'm sure that Spartan's probably mad at me for the fact. I don't know why Ron's not here. He's probably got a date. So I'm gonna go to Oklahoma and check on Ron. Make sure that he's got a date or something. All right, Blind Fair was here though. 80s Kid, Brandon, VP in 2008. Banks collapse. Brandon is resident in 03. Banks collapse. This guy should never be in politics. Well, this guy should not be in politics for other reasons, but there's that. Let's see. AIDS Kid says Blind Fair. Honestly, man, this guy is pure AIDS. And Mr. Scott will probably finish out the night here. Says it's pitiful, the raid on El Paso. Limited text is a giveaway that it's info gathering. Well, all social media is info gathering. Number 1, bought by bots. You think? I don't know. It might be somewhat grassroots, but I'm sure it's botted too. Probably made a deal to sell 3 million copies for 1 cent each. I don't have Apple Music or iTunes, so I guess I can't go back and look. But I'd be curious to see what it's at on other platforms. I don't know where I would go look for it. Because on Spotify, it would be a play. Yes, I know. 13 minus 7 is 6. I'm tired. Leave me alone. Probably gonna go. No, I gotta eat that chicken. I have to eat that, otherwise I gotta throw it out. But I'm probably gonna take a shower, eat dinner, and go to bed. Mr. Scott, yeah, get pwned. I can go off sometimes. Mr. Scott says, I try not to be anti-Semitic unless I have a really good reason. There are really racist Jews out there, just like any other group. Yeah, and that's the thing. And I do appreciate that, by the way. You go down other avenues of conspiracy, but it's not a constant, like, it's not a daily thing with you either. And that was the point that I made when I got mad on stream the other night. It's like, it's just, get a new script, get a new line, get a new shtick, get a new act. Because you come in and you do the exact same thing and say the exact same thing every single night that I come in and stream. Mr. Scott, if you do it, it's like once every 2 weeks you'll go down to that. And the DNA code. I don't mind you coming and spamming stuff if you change it up every once in a while. But it's just it was at that point. Spartan had come in and done it like 6 days in a row. So I lost it. I did. Probably ended my YouTube career. I don't know. But we're done. We're out of here. Yeah, if you lose Ron Helton, your YouTube career is over, because that is the most loyal human being I've ever seen on a YouTube channel. He doesn't miss unless there's a really good reason. Yeah, Fanning was always here in the morning. I miss, well, and I understand too, because I'm on while Fanning is putting his daughter to bed, so I don't know. Let's head out of here for the day. Alright, so with that, we are done. We're out of here. Thanks everybody who came by and chatted throughout the past week and also came in here as well tonight. We'll be back here tomorrow, 6 p.m. Central Time, for more news, more headlines, more contemporary. Maybe we'll see a bank run. Who knows? Maybe we'll just see regular news, regular foreign policy, and regular bubbling of the Biden admin. We don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't practice Santeria. And I'm sitting here usually surprised at the same time as the rest of you, although I get probably about 20 more minutes of advance notice than you do, because that's when I start to set up the show. But come back and join me. We will see what is happening in the next 22 hours in the world of news, politics, headlines, and all the other fun stuff that goes along with that. I got some really cool stuff too for things I like and things that I hate, so we're not always going to be bombarded by political and downtrodden doom and gloom. So, and plus we've got things I'm thankful for, we've got the rules of acquisition, we've got plenty of other stuff, so come back here, join us again. Until next time, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.